Welcome to another episode of Take Up Space. And today we have in the studio Zahra Somani.
Hi.
And she is an LMFT, so a licensed marriage family therapist, and she works specifically with couples on sex therapy. And she is South Asian, so she's representing today. Oh, also she has a podcast, Inclusive Therapist. Anyway, I'm so excited because even when I was like yesterday, I made an Instagram story and I was like, tomorrow in the podcast studio, we have Zahra coming and she's going to talk about sex. And I said it like 15 times and it was just so liberating to just say it out loud on the story. And I didn't really care what anybody else thought, but I was like, wow, there's something about just being able to talk about it without any like shame or hesitation. That being said, when I sat down to do this on the way here and our friend Vikash is listening to this episode out there, I was feeling a little bit like, oh, like I still do feel a little bit of hesitation around the concept and just being so open and talking about it. So today I'm going to pick your brain and I want to hear, just to start off, like if you want to introduce yourself in any kind of way, but also like what brought you to this space of sex therapy specifically for couples.
Yeah, great. Thank you, first of all, for letting me be here. I, too, love talking about sex. And
I love how many times we're going to say sex.
It's so fun. And the thing that I have noticed is that everybody wants to talk about sex. They just can't. And so that's part of my reason for being here, right, is I get to provide permission for that. And that's a really important role that I think therapists in general play, is permission for feelings, permission to talk about things that we don't normally get to talk about, like sex. And so I'm really happy to be here. So thanks for having me on.
Of course, yeah.
Part of what brought me to this space is, truthfully, is that I have a lot of friends that were complaining about how they didn't enjoy having sex in their marriage. And I heard it again and again, whether it was the men or the women. It was just a common theme that I was noticing in our culture.
Yeah.
And it made me question why. Like, what is it that is causing us to feel this way? And I feel really passionate about this because sex is a really fundamental part of what it means to be human. We cannot exist as a human race without it. But also, anatomically, sex is not just about procreation. There are parts of our body that are relegated just for pleasure, right? And we're not able to explore that because of all these layers of stigma, culture, family rules.
Yeah.
And it really impedes and hinders our experience as human beings on this earth.
Yeah.
And we get to live better. So it's important for me to be the voice for that so that we get to start talking about the things that we really want to talk about.
Right.
We get to have good sex in our relationships, period.
We all deserve that.
Yeah.
So it's interesting when I think about sex and in relationship, there's these couple therapists I follow and they'll talk a lot about the loss of like eros, I think is what it's called. So it's desire and like vitality in a relationship. And sometimes they'll say like, oh, you know, you'll have this like powerful sexual relationship that just gets lost through the years because of maybe like doing the same thing over and over again or just routine. But the most interesting one was because of unspoken resentment. And that could like kind of kill the flame of a relationship or kill the desire of a relationship. And I always find that really fascinating because to me, like a part of sex as a conversation, as like not just procreation, like you said, it is also about exploring yourself and another human being. And I think, and it's sacred if you choose to see it that way, and it's extremely vulnerable if you choose to see it that way. But I think there's something about the concept in couples and marriages where, you know, depending on the relationship you have, which in our South Asian community is sold as like, kind of like ownership of the other person, and a lot of codependency and enmeshment that kind of starts to happen. And so each person loses their sense of self. You lose like that sense of curiosity and playful desire and like all the stuff that would make sex fun and pleasurable. So I'm curious, like, do you see that in your practice when you're working with couples?
Yeah. So, you know, couples and sex therapy is interesting because traditionally sex therapy used to be, you know, not a thing that therapists brought up, actually. And even when I was in school, there were several therapists around me that were uncomfortable with the topic of sex.
Yeah.
But what we realized is that, so the original thought was, if you are good in your relationship, then you'll have a great sex life. Like you don't have to deal with this if you're dealing with this. But I've seen the whole gamut. I've seen people who don't like each other and that impacts their sex life. I've seen people that go at it in arguments and have great sex lives.
Okay.
And what we've seen is that they are related and they both get to be treated. And so when a couple comes to me for the intake, immediately I will ask them, okay, what are you here for? What's the problem? And then I'll ask them, I also do sex therapy. Is that something that you're interested in?
Okay.
And then that's when they'll let me know, yes, that's impacted too. But I don't go to sex therapy before we do the relational work.
Gotcha.
Because you're right. Like there's a huge piece of the sex is sometimes last on the list, right? I don't even want to hang out with you. I don't want to have a meal with you. I don't want to touch you. I don't want to be in the same room with you. There's varying degrees of this, right? And sex is really interesting too, because it's not, what's cool about sex and sex therapy is that it's not a formula. It's an exploration. What does sex mean to you? What is the role that it plays in your relationship? For some people, it's about intimacy. For some people, it's about tension release. For some people, it's just a part of what we do. And all of that is okay. But because we don't talk about it, we don't know.
Right.
And so there is resentment that's tied up in the relationship. There's resentment that's tied up in sex. And we get to explore all of that. But they are definitely related in many cases.
Yeah. And I think the idea of like not being able to talk about it is so important. I grew up completely like thinking it was such a bad thing to talk about. Like, in our community or in my community, like taboo is like a kind way of saying that it was just something you just don't bring up.
Totally.
And it's one of those conversations I would have loved to have with like a parent at a certain age. And that made it normal, and that made it more than just about safety, but also covering like the idea of what it's meant for outside of procreation. But I say all that to say is I didn't have sex until after, like way later in life, until I was 28, which is a very long time after. And because I didn't know what I wanted or liked or enjoyed. And I would never talk about any of those things because I was too embarrassed to talk about them. And in that in that silence, I lost so much insight that I only gained way later in life, where I feel like I've missed out,
Yeah. So when I was in school, my professor headed a research project on sexual communication and relationship satisfaction. And what he found was that the number one predictor of relationship satisfaction is not money, it's not socioeconomics, it's not your education level. The number one predicting factor of whether or not, couples are satisfied in their relationships is sexual communication. Can you talk about sex with your partner?
Yeah.
That's the number one indicator for relationship satisfaction.
Wow.
Yeah.
So can you comfortably communicate your sexual needs and just the entire topic?
Yeah, right? So like as you're having sex, is this comfortable for you? Can you use your voice? Can you tell your partner, I want it this way, I want it that way, I like this, don't do that?
Ugh.
Can you talk?
There is just so much shame induced to the topic that it is probably really hard to be that intimate and bring it up, I think. Like, it was before. Now it isn't for me. But in those moments, what you're talking about, I could see how it would be such a struggle for people.
And when we're unable to talk about things that are so important, right, and that are so vulnerable and intimate, when we can't talk about that, it creates a barrier in our relationship. There's a part of me that you don't get access to, and then that barrier gets amplified and magnified in other places.
Right.
So it's a good mirror.
Right. Yeah. That barrier can become the resentment.
Do I feel safe with you?
Yeah.
Right. So if you can't talk to me about that, that's also a message to me that I'm getting. Right. Is sometimes, and that's the thing with couples work, is that, it's part of it is I have a reaction to what you're saying. And then based on that reaction, I'm then going to do or say something. And then you're going to have your own internal story about what's going on. Right. So for you, it might be, I feel so much shame because I'm not used to talking about this. Yeah. But because you're unable to talk about it with me, perhaps the message, the message of the story that I'm creating is, oh, she doesn't feel safe with me. Yeah. Or I'm not a partner that is good enough to have somebody talk to me about this. Right. Or, sometimes I have a couple who the problem that, one of them faces is that when their partner doesn't talk to them about sex, they feel like a perpetrator. Right. Wow. So there's so many.
So they feel like they're forcing it upon.
Exactly.
Because they can't tell.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. And you can imagine that. So sometimes it's resentment and sometimes it's, I don't know what is going on in the space if you don't tell me. And then my own internal stories become really loud and impact the experience that we're having.
God, that's very relatable. Yeah, it was because I was in this relationship where we were not having sex. And I think like I interpreted as disinterest. Like, you're not
Exactly.
interested in me, obviously. I don't know why we're together, but like, you're obviously not interested in me. And anytime I would bring up the conversation, it was like, no, that's not it. I just need to think about what it is, but that's not it.
Yeah.
But that was very confusing. And I think at the same time, I also, because I assumed disinterest, then a part of me like shut down in response to any type of intimacy
Yeah.
because I assumed that you weren't interested. And so I sold that story to myself internally. And now this person is responding by furthermore not engaging.
Yeah.
So I get what you're saying. It's like a twofold situation.
Yeah.
I guess I'm curious, like when you see a couple, they bring to you some sort of problem, you see that it's related to sex. How do you then go in and kind of like deconstruct that?
Yeah.
Because you're working with a couple, right? And
Yeah.
then they have their individual perspectives as well.
Yeah. So are you open to some role play?
Sure.
Okay.
Let's go.
So my favorite session in sex therapy is the
Yeah.
first one.
Okay.
Because we often have, just like outside of the bedroom, we have all of these ideas and stories that we create or that have come from earlier in our life. So the first question I like to ask, which you can practice on me with, is when was the first time that you learned about sex? What's your first memory of
Ever?
it? Mm-hmm.
Oof. Oh my God, this is okay. I didn't know what was happening, but I think when I was really, really, really young, I was unfortunately introduced to porn and also witnessed sex.
Okay.
And those were my first experiences, but I didn't know what they meant.
Right. And when you were introduced to this, what was like, were you alone? Were you with somebody else?
Alone.
Okay. And did you stay and watch?
I kind of was terrified
Okay.
and confused.
Okay. Was it dark?
Very.
Okay. What made you scared and confused?
I think because there was no one narrating that experience for me in a way where I could consume it. I think where I was probably like younger than 12 maybe. And because it was confusing and the circumstances of it were confusing, I think that's what made it scary.
Yeah. So I'm hearing that there is darkness. You were alone.
Absolutely.
You didn't have anyone to process with. I'm guessing you probably just heard noises that you couldn't understand.
In some cases, I was visually seeing.
Visually seeing things that you couldn't understand.
Yeah.
Great. And did you talk to anybody about it afterwards?
I didn't because it was at home and I didn't think that like children have this amazing instinct that they know when something is good to say or not to say, right? So even though nobody said, hey, Farah, you saw that, don't say anything, because nobody was talking to me. But I felt that it was in the best course of action was to never repeat that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And here's the thing. You can call it instinct, but it's instinct that comes from understanding our surroundings.
Yeah.
There are family rules. Some of them are explicit. You have a curfew at this time.
Exactly, yeah.
Some of them are implicit. We have money. We don't have money. This is how we use money.
Yeah, this was implicit as hell, but
100%.
I knew that saying it would be breaking a rule of something.
Exactly. And this is a really common sort of experience. One of my friends that I was talking to was saying that, she remembers educating her whole class on sex because she was like, oh, this is so cool. Another one of my friends was like, I remember looking it up in an encyclopedia and hiding under the desk in my classroom with a friend of mine. So the messaging we get is it's covert.
Right.
Right.
Needs to be hidden.
Or it's something that we educate people about. It's a school subject that I want to be a teacher in. Absolutely. And so when we think about some of these earlier ideas, we're looking at what were the ideas that shape your understanding of sex. For you, it's secret, it's maybe unsafe, it's scary.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's not something I can talk about.
Right.
And you got that message really early on.
Really early.
And as you know, as a therapist, right, like this informs how we walk through the world in general, right? Yeah. Like we absorb messages about gender, about sexuality, about money, about status, all of these things. And we use that to operate throughout the world. And what's so cool about therapy is we get to make the implicit explicit. So we get to start seeing what are the frames around us that have been dictating 95% of our thoughts without us realizing it. You get to bring it to the forefront and then decide, right? That's the cool thing about being an adult in therapy is you have choice.
Yeah.
You get to look at that and say, oh, that's what has been running my life. Is it working for me? Is it not working for me? And then I can change it. And the same thing happens with sex. The very first thing we do is we say, how did you learn about sex? Because so much of that is about how we're going to then, without realizing it, subconsciously think about sex moving forward, right? For me, I remember being like, I don't know, like 4, 5. And I remember driving, we used to live in Chicago, and I remember driving home from some place that we would go to all the time, and it said unisex hair salon. But I recognized the word sex. And I asked my mom, I said, what does that say? And she's like, I don't know, I can't read. That's literally what she told me.
Completely avoided it.
Yeah. And so, and I remember seeing they had a bottle of perfume in the car that they would keep, and it said sex appeal. And same thing, I was like, but what does this word say? Right? And so understanding that, like, this is not something that our family talks about. And sensing the embarrassment of my family around that, right? So once we start looking at it, then it makes sense. Oh, so then when I am in the bedroom, maybe that's why I don't speak.
Maybe that's what comes up for me.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's so relatable. That was phenomenal. I was a little nervous with your role play thing.
Welcome to my client experience. I always tell them I have to turn the AC down really low because they get so nervous in these sessions.
I'm dead. No, it's so relatable because it's so true. I think it was subconsciously being filtered out that way.
Yeah.
And of course now, like, doing some work and in hindsight, it all makes sense. But I think it's so important to be able to go back to your first schema or your first mental like conception of what that is. Because when you don't know, to your point, like your behaviors can be anything that are just protective in nature, right? Like I'm going to not say anything because I feel discomfort or I feel shame or embarrassment. And then that can be interpreted in so many ways, and you lose out on one of the things that I do feel like, what's your opinion on this? I feel like sex is such an important part of a relationship.
100%, yeah.
Intimate relationship or whatever you decide. But like the act itself is the most vulnerable act that I could think of, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I think our bodies will react to that in a certain way, right?
Yeah.
Because it is, we have a self-protective mechanism. What our research shows is that sex is a really important part holistically of a good like relationship, right? So there's communication, there's sex, there's partnership, there's your finances, all the things, right? When it's working, sex is about, like, maybe takes up 15 to 20% of your whole relationship. When it's not working, takes up about 80% because it's so difficult and painful that it kind of overtakes everything else. There's so much anxiety around it when it's not working well.
That's a big percentage when it's not working well. And I guess being South Asian and being in this space, knowing that the stigma and shame, it comes from our parents, right? Like, or from generations before them, where they would see unisex and pretend they didn't. Or in my case, like, no conversation was being had, or kids were being exposed to things that maybe they shouldn't be without conversation. What would you say is like kind of most important for our community to maybe start to break that stigma or start to like have more conversations like these and see change? And I mean this for parents out there too, you know.
I think it's a good question. How do we change what we don't like? We do something different, right? And it takes courage. And if we're not talking about it, let's start talking about it. Especially our research is so clear on the benefits of parents talking to their kids about sex. It is...
Yeah, can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, you know, when we have the courage to talk about sex, you create a safe space for your kids. You give them permission. This is something that they get to explore. It provides confidence, right? It provides an ability to explore emotions and associate them with our bodies, right? Different ones than the automatic of shame. There are age-appropriate ways to talk about sex too. But what's also really interesting in my research that when I was in school that I noticed was in Western education, we have sort of assigned that sex, like, so I remember doing this during camps. That like, oh, kids, you don't have to worry about the 6 and 7 year olds because they don't know anything about sex. But when you get to 11 and 12, because hormones, and that's when you need to worry about them. Like, actually, sex education for kids starts right around like birth, right? Like right after. You will see babies touching themselves. You will see them feeling around. You want to start sex education early because it's not just you're allowed to have sex, you're not allowed to have sex. When we start to educate kids about their body parts and like what is appropriate and inappropriate, it's a great way to minimize or mitigate sexual assault for kids. Hygiene is a big part of sex education. When we talk about sex education, this is another thing that's really frustrating, right? Is when we talk about sex education, it becomes, oh, it's about having sex.
Right.
But it's actually about sexual organs of our body and how this is all integrated into our body. Sex is not separate from our bodies. It's a part of who we are. Right. So sex education is not just talking about are we having sex and is it safe? It's how are we treating our sexual organs? Do girls know how to manage their periods? Do they know what hygiene feels and looks like, right? Do we know when it's okay for somebody to touch us or not touch us and who, right? Even self-touch, right? We have body parts that are designed for pleasure. So how do we start talking about that?
I mean, self-touch is the most interesting one too, because it's not just about shame around sex, but self-touch is something that I never was taught, ever discussed, never happened. And even to this day, like sometimes it is such an uncomfortable topic to bring up, just among people in general, right? So I'm curious, like what could you tell us about the importance of self-touch?
It is, I really think it's about developing a relationship with yourself, right? Like how can we be intimate with somebody else when we are not intimate with ourselves? Any relationship, whether it's sexual or otherwise, we're only going to get as much as we are giving, right? And we get to explore, whether it's therapeutically, whether it's emotional, physical, sexual, that self-exploration on any level, not just sexually, is so important, right? Like I want to know what feels good for me, whether it's, what feels good to my body nutritionally or what feels good to my body in terms of touch, right? It's a way to develop a relationship with myself.
Right.
And at the end of the day, I am born with myself. I die with myself. I am going to be the longest relationship that I have, and it's worth investing in.
Yeah.
It's worth. And I think the other thing that's also really important is subconsciously we send ourselves so many messages, and that reinforces so many other like chain reactions, chemical reactions, thought processes in our body, right? So when we are thinking about our genitals, when we're thinking about touching ourselves, and ideas of shame come up, your body is processing that.
Right.
And it's reinforcing certain narratives and ways in which we are carrying ourselves. It's related sometimes to weight. It's related to your body size and shape. It's related to your health conditions. I mean, it is pervasive, right? So we get to start really, it's not just the sexual relationship, but in general, redefining the relationship that we have with ourselves, actually understanding that I get to have a relationship with myself. And like, what does that mean?
Yeah. And that's so important because we sell that when we talk about being ready for a relationship, and we talk about knowing what our needs, wants, boundaries are, how our life is. And so you're kind of it's just funny. We've never really incorporated sex and self-touch in that conversation where just like you discover yourself and who you are and what you need, like this is a part of that.
Yeah.
That's so important.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Okay. And I wanted to ask this early, but for you specifically, because you're speaking so passionately on the topic, you're obviously really skilled at what you do because you just cornered me. But I'm curious, what in your journey made you hit this spot as like, this is where I want to like specialize? And I mean, whatever you're comfortable sharing.
Yeah. It actually came in like a lightning strike moment for me. It was like a really hard left pivot from what I was doing earlier when I had an encounter that really jarred me. I was at a friend's second marriage.
Okay.
And it was a bit of like some people felt like it was a bit scandalous. I don't know. Okay.
Because it was the second one?
It was a second one and under certain circumstances that were being created.
Gotcha.
And somebody who knew my friend's family saw the mehndi on my hand after her like biti or whatever. And they were really not nice about it. They were like, why does she have to do something so big? Like, what's the big deal? Like, why is she making such a big deal about this? And it bothered me so deeply because what I consistently see is other women gatekeeping other women.
Yeah.
And that we don't have the freedom to have pleasure. We don't allow it for ourselves, and therefore we don't allow it for other people. And what ended up happening was I got so mad that I complained to my friends. I was like, I am so tired of women not like shaming other women, but then also I'm tired of so many of my friends saying I don't want to have sex with my partner because I don't feel good about myself, and sex is gross and this and that. It just made me angry. And my friends they were like, stop complaining, go do something about it. That's literally what they said. And I was like, oh, you're right. And that was it. I went and I was like, no, you're right. Like, if I don't like what I see, I get to be the one that changes that. I'm not going to wait for anybody else to do it.
Yeah. So you're really embodying what you just recommended, which is like to speak up and do something
Absolutely.
about it, like play your part.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think it's really important. And I can't tell you, just like you were like, oh, I'm so excited. I got to say sex so many times on Instagram. As soon as I say it, you would be astonished at the amount of people that come to me afterwards and pull me. I was like, can we talk about sex? And I have this question, and my husband this, and my wife this.
Because you're opening the door.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we all want it. So everyone wants to talk about sex. Yeah.
Yeah. It reminds me of like addiction, right? Like we don't talk about it enough. And then when somebody starts talking
100%.
about it, it's like, hey, wait, like let me tell you my story and mine and mine.
That's exactly right.
Like, you're just
That's
opening
exactly
up the can.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So that was a lightning strike moment for you.
Totally.
Were you already a couples therapist at the time?
No. And so what I did was I looked up, I was like, okay, my friends were like, I was like, what do you mean? How do I fix this? And they're like, be a sex therapist. And I was like,
so that's like a specific,
yeah. So I went online and then I was like, okay, how do I be a sex therapist? And then went down the rabbit hole of alphabet soup of LPC, LCSW, LMF, all the things, and then started going down the route of, okay, what does it mean to be, so to do sex therapy? I got a marriage and family therapy degree.
Okay. Right.
Sex therapy also has different certifications that you can get.
Gotcha.
And that usually, at least in the state of Texas, allows you to work with sex offenders.
Okay.
There's also sex education. And then, so I took classes on it. I've been doing coursework on it.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. So in the world of therapy that I have, the modalities we use for like trauma, let's say, which are rooted in core beliefs, which is kind of what you're talking about, right? And body responses. We work with those specific beliefs and sensations and like reprocess through things to decrease that charge or make new meaning. Okay. So I'm curious, like, what type of modality does a sex therapist use?
Yeah, that's a great question. It depends, right? So I think trauma-informed work is really important.
Yeah.
And even just having the trauma lens is important, even if it's not the exact modality, you can always bring in bits and pieces.
Right.
But the model that I use, so it depends on what the person wants, right? So first of all is like sex education. So, starting off saying, okay, how do you learn about sex, but also providing good psychoeducation on this, right? So understanding that so about, of all the material that we're exposed to, about 30% of it is harmful to us. 50% of it is titillating and irrelevant, and about 20% is like useful. You're going to go to the grocery store and see, 365 days a year of really hot sex, how to make your man do blah, 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 blah. Here's how to grow your penis 2 inches longer, right? Like, it's not helpful.
Yeah.
But what happens is you have these initial misconceptions, and then you have so much more that gets added, especially with like media, pop culture, social media, right? You're getting all of these images and these understandings of what sex should look like Hollywood sex. It's supposed to look like this. It's supposed to last this long. Most people don't know, like they think sex is supposed to last hours. Usually, sex lasts about 30 to 45 minutes, and of that, intercourse is 2 to 7 minutes.
Yeah.
Most people don't know that.
Yeah.
And so sometimes when men hear that, they're like, oh, okay, I'm not like prematurely ejaculating because I didn't have sex for an hour. I'm like, no, you're not, right?
Yeah.
So even understanding like what is normal, right? Or that at any given point, 5 to 15% of the people are not going to have a good sexual experience that day, and that's normal. So I think part of what the approach that I use is insight into ourselves. Number one. Psychoeducation. So we use the biopsychosocial model, right? Is there biologically, so sometimes people come with, sexual dysfunction problems. So for women, it could be like vaginismus, where their vagina closes or the muscles are really tight and it's very painful. For men, it can be erectile dysfunction. So first understanding the biological aspects of things. Like, is there something that we need to address medically? Are medications causing erectile dysfunction, which sometimes like certain medications can do that?
Yeah. Or like, I'm assuming like hormones and things like that.
Exactly. All of these things. Exactly. Right. What age are we? Premenopausal, postmenopausal, right? Then you're looking at the rest of it too. So like what's our social understanding of things, right? What's our psychological understanding internally? So looking at all of these aspects and starting to create a model of what that looks like for us, but also what are your goals? So getting on the same page of what does sex mean for me? Also education, like, you know, I have a lot of couples that get really stressed out because they're like, well, I'm the only one that initiates, right? So it feels like I'm the only one that wants sex, but sex doesn't have to be like, it's okay to like warm up to it. And sometimes I ask my clients, I'm like, okay, well, you didn't initiate, but did you like it? And they're like, well, yeah. And I'm like, so then what's the problem? Right?
It happened and you liked it.
But there's a misconception that if I'm not the one initiating, then I don't want it bad enough. My partner doesn't really want it. But some of us are initiators and some of us are like, you know, slow to warm, and that's okay. But again, if we're not even realizing that these are normal options within the range, we don't know. So educating them on some of these fears and misconceptions. Am I broken? Is there something wrong with me? And then the model that I also really like to use for couples. So, you know, sometimes like you have moms that are tapped out, you know, like I am touched out. I don't want to do this. Sometimes sex becomes a really contentious place in the bedroom because there's expectations around it. Well, if I touch my husband like this, he's going to expect me to have sex, and I don't want that. Or vice versa, right? Like, oh, I'm really stressed out, but my wife always wants to have sex and I'm just not comfortable and I don't know what to do and I don't know how to talk about it. All these things. So the model that I like to use with most of my couples after we kind of assess in these ways and start talking about sex and some of our barriers is what's called sensate focus. Okay. And it's like a 4-stage process, but it starts with just touching. Okay. So non-sexual touching, clothes on, clothes off, but it's not genital, not sexual, and you're just exploring. And we're starting to understand, like, what does touch feel like? What does it mean to be a giver? What does it mean to be a receiver? What parts do I like and enjoy? What are the feelings that get cultivated in this? And we kind of process, what is that experience like? And you slowly escalate through the stages. My clients are not allowed to have sex during this time.
I was just gonna say, like, you're kind of like directing this for them to do?
Exactly. It's their homework. Yeah.
It's their homework.
Yes. They don't do it in my office.
Right.
Many people think sex therapy is me. I don't know what. My 75-year-old neighbor was like, so do you go to people's houses? I'm like, no. I do not go to people's houses. I'm not teaching them how to have sex.
This is your announcement.
Yes, it is my announcement. PSA. Okay. Not what I do. Not for hire. But we talk about what it felt like, and we reprogram touch. So similar to, I have clients who have had traumatic experiences. Right. Sometimes it requires a higher level of care, and sometimes, you know, we process slowly because a lot of things will get flushed up in that process.
Right. Yeah, because that reminds me of what we go towards is like reprocessing those specific memories or moments that have impacted that belief.
Yeah.
So you're kind of doing that way. You're kind of giving them a new experience to touch.
Exactly. Right. Exactly. And over time, like, you'll find that, you know, couples will start to, some of those feelings will start to come back. Because often too, like when we are in long-term sexual relationships, we don't stop to take the time to touch. And it's normal, like even, you know, we talk about like as couples, oh, we're not dating as much, we don't spend time, we're not roommates, whatever. It's because you actually did spend more time in the beginning of your relationship doing these things, right? So that's why you had more time to get to know them. That's why it's not just that you get bored, it's that we allocate our time differently. We're thinking about things differently. And so we get to revisit some of these things and go back to basics and learn what is it like to just slowly touch my partner? What is it like to be touched, to be cared for? And how do I learn to associate touch without sex? Because often it becomes a gateway. And so sensate focus is really important, where the rule is do not have sex because you don't want to reinforce that this is a gateway.
Gotcha. It's like in your mind, you don't want to think that it always leads to sex.
Exactly.
It can just be pleasurable on its own.
Exactly. And that's also part of sex therapy is, you know, when we do the psychoeducation, we also talk about like, okay, what does it mean to have sex at this stage? Like when I was in school, I was looking up, like we were, you know, doing statistics or whatever, 40% of people between the ages of 60 and 85 are sexually active. 2/3 of the people in that
That's
age.
amazing.
I know.
I'm so happy for them.
Yes. But
And my
also,
future.
I remember in our class, everybody was like, wait, what? Like, how was the first question, right? Like, how, what are they, what? Right. And I think it's really important to stop and say, how are we even defining sex? I'll give you another example. When women go in to the doctor and they're asking, are you sexually active?
Yeah.
They're asking, are you sexually active? Are you having intercourse with a heterosexual partner?
Right.
What if I'm a lesbian?
Right.
What does sex mean for me then?
Right.
If I'm not having intercourse, does that count as sex?
Yeah.
Right. So even understanding like what is the range? Like what's my like sexual buffet?
Right.
Like what do I get to tap into? What feels good for me? And understanding that it's more than intercourse. It can be foreplay. It can be, kissing. It can just be, it can be both of us, using our hands on each other and not actually having intercourse. We get to pick, right? It doesn't have to be dictated for us. So part of this process gets to be, let's talk about what actually feels good instead of falling into the assumption of what we think we're supposed to be doing. Because often, even when we start our sexual relationship, we're not talking about these things. We're just
so true.
doing what we think we're supposed to do or what Hollywood shows us.
Yeah, like what we've seen.
Yeah. So at this stage, we get to kind of have a rediscovery and say, okay, what was I thinking about sex? What do I want to think now? What are all the different factors that are at play? And like, what do I want sex to look like for me and my partner at this stage in my life? And sometimes it's different. Like I'll have couples say, but yeah, like when we first got married 20 years ago, like we were all over each other. I'm like, yeah, that was 20 years ago. Like you get to redefine that 20 years later and say, what does that look like for you now?
This seems like an important practice that everyone should do.
Yes.
At some point.
Yes.
Because it's just such a, because one thing that it relates back to is like, we also try to create new neural pathways and experiences. And that's what you're doing. Like you're helping them revisit or like reunite with something that's already within them that might have been like lost in experience and translation.
Yeah.
I want to do it.
Yeah, it's great. Highly recommend it. I mean, it's awesome, right? Like to me, I'm like, why wouldn't you?
Yeah.
It's something that if you come across something that makes your life better, why wouldn't you?
Yeah. Or it enhances the quality of like how present you are.
Yeah.
Because to me, like what you're describing is like so sensational and like sensation as in it's really attuned to how you feel and what touch feels like. It's one of the things we don't focus on when we're talking about being mindful or present. Like that feels the most alive to me, what you just described.
Yeah. Yeah.
Really
and
cool.
I think sometimes we're also not, we get to, the other thing about sex therapy is, when my clients go and do stage 1 or stage 2 or whatever, they come in and then we deeply talk about it.
Okay.
Right. And so in that process, like each person gets to hear from the other what they liked. Right.
Yeah.
And we get to understand like men are really focused on their partner's pleasure. In fact, like sometimes they themselves don't really need satisfaction. They want to find that from their partner. That's what's good for them.
Yeah, I've heard that a lot. Like I find pleasure if you're being
Exactly.
pleasured, which like gives them some sort of like, I guess, it's satisfying to them.
Yeah.
But I also think maybe it's like it boosts for them to know that they were able to do that.
Yeah, right. It's any number of things. And in these conversations, that's exactly what we get to explore.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, great. You want to pleasure me because sometimes women will feel like awkward or scared or, I don't want to make them feel bad or maybe they don't, there's so many thoughts.
Or obligated to give back or whatever.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And we often don't, take each other's word in that moment. So when we're in this safe space, we get to really talk about, and both parties get to talk about being givers and receivers, which is really cool. And you get to discover within yourself, like, oh, I didn't realize actually that I really like this touch. I feel really comfortable.
Yeah.
Or, oh, I really like being the giver, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know if this is possible, but like, could you share a situation that stands out to you of a couple that you saw the trajectory of? Like they went through this experience and maybe like what they came out of it, this, like the insight was something you might would have never thought of based on what they were experiencing, if possible.
Well, what I can say without giving details, what I can say, so it's funny because even for me as a therapist, I see myself as very logical.
Yeah.
And so therapy is really confusing for me because I'm just like
art and science.
Like what's happening to me? Like when I first saw my therapist, I was not nice to her. I was like, I'm really smart. I'm really self-reflective. I don't know what you're going to give me in this process. I was a lot meaner when I said it too.
Hilarious.
And a year later, I was like, I don't know what you did, but I'm now going to school to figure it out because this was amazing. Right. And like and that's how therapy works is it's like you just chip away and it's very nebulous. Like you don't actually know what's happening. I'm not doing anything tangible. I'm not giving you like anything that's going to, but it's over time you start to like soften and whittle away these like walls. And then something new comes all of a sudden. And what I've seen that's really inspiring to me is will have sometimes clients that are like couples that are really shut down to this, right? And really just can't do it, who then will be like, man, I actually am like really starting to enjoy this process, right? And for me to see transformation in them, in anybody, whether it's sex therapy or whether it's couples therapy or in general, but to watch another human being transform is such a humbling and beautiful process. It's one of my favorite things about this job. And like, it's such a privilege that I don't take lightly. Like people come to me and I am not unaware of how like vulnerable they are and how much like they have to expose themselves. Right. And like, and it can be humiliating for them to sit across from somebody and talk about this. And I don't take that lightly. Yeah. And so to watch them go from there to gaining confidence, it's like watching kids grow. It's so incredible to see. And what I can say from my experience is that I've done this again and again and again. And what I've seen is that over time, transformation really does happen. And it really makes me believe in this work and that, things can get better. Yeah. They can get better.
I love that.
Yeah.
Hope. You're instilling hope in us all. I guess to narrow in on, I know you said South Asians are not necessarily your focus on the clientele, but you might have some or you've experienced couples.
My goal is to work with South Asians.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Like you want to be fully...
And I mean, like what I want to do is be a resource for this community. So I got in here not to just be any old therapist, but to be like, hey, I am the permission. Come, let's go. Let me support you in this journey.
So I asked because I'm with the South Asian community specifically. I wonder if like what you see them coming in with is at any way like specific or different than others. Just because of like the roles that we have within our community when it comes to gender and just the norms, right? Like, when I think about the marriage of like my parents or other people, there was, like I was saying early on, there's this sense of ownership. There's this template that they have that I'm trying to like verbalize, which I'm doing a poor job right now. But the point is that like it almost seems like baked in that one, sex is obligation. Like you owe me that, or like you're mine, so you must, or something around those lines. And women feel almost like they have to comply. And that's one example. But I just feel like in the community, those gender norms are so like structured and strict. So I'm curious, is there anything you see within that community that stands out?
So yes, kind of. So I want to speak a little bit about the research that I did because it speaks to this. So that was my assumption.
Okay.
When I did my research, so my research is on gender role expectations.
Yes.
South Asian women,
I saw that. Yeah.
gender role expectations and its impact. So, who am I expected to be as a woman and that impact on my well-being. So my happiness, on my relationship satisfaction, and on my sexual attitudes and behaviors. Okay.
Nice. Yeah.
And my assumption when I did this research was, these men, right? They're making women feel bad about the things they want to do, their career ambitions, having sex, blah, blah, blah. Okay, well, instead of talking out of my ass, let me go research this and see what happened.
Yeah.
And I found something actually really interesting.
Okay.
So what I found, so in general, like what we found, we also solved for like when you came to the U.S. And so what we noticed is with women, South Asian women who are first generation, so people who migrated here, they have less conflict about their gender roles. Okay. So they're more sort of Eastern gender roles about women and their worldviews, but also their actions and their behaviors and expectations okay with. And because there's not a lot of conflict, their well-being, their happiness is up. Okay, so inverse relationship. And first-generation women also have more closed attitudes and behaviors around sex. Okay. South Asian women who are born in the U.S. have higher rates of conflict with their gender role expectations. And it's an internal conflict. So they're renegotiating identities based on these different, based on acculturation. I'm Western, I'm Eastern, what do I do? My parents said one thing, my school raised, right? Okay. And because of the internal conflict, they have lower well-being. They're less happy, more rates of depression, et cetera. And they tend to have more open attitudes and behaviors around sex. Okay, so that's what we know.
Okay.
Now, what's really interesting is that none of this had an impact on relationship satisfaction.
Interesting.
So what we know is that conflict is
Yes.
present in
Okay.
gender roles, but it is unrelated to their relationship satisfaction.
So it doesn't at all impact, or in your research, impact or touch the satisfaction of the relationship.
Correct. And so I'm like, well, if their conflict is present and it's unrelated to relationship satisfaction, then where's it coming from?
Yeah.
And that's where I get to do more research. And the
Okay.
hypothesis and the anecdotal evidence suggests that it's the other women in the community potentially,
no.
potentially,
Potentially.
unsubstantiated. But it's sort of what we're starting to see is, and it's also consistent with where I came from, right? Of like,
Yeah.
it was another woman commenting on another woman's
Right.
marriage, right? And there's
Your-
other women
yeah.
that are sort of gatekeeping pleasure, which is what was making me so frustrated. Now, I say that to say that when we get into couple scenarios, the idea is, oh, it's like this. But actually, in reality, that's not the experience that I have with
Yeah.
couples.
Yeah. Wow, that's fascinating.
Yeah.
I know you're hypothesizing right now with this part of it, but do you think that women against women in this situation, like in terms of being the ones that are like gatekeeping, do you think that's a projection, if true? And, I just want to hear your thoughts. Like, do you think it's a projection of like, well, I can't, so you can't. And she couldn't, so you can't, and so we all can't. And if you do, then it's just not fair.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah?
I think that's a lot of it, right? I think it's so many things. I think that's a huge part of it, right? As well, I couldn't, and so you cannot. I think part of it is just discomfort, and we don't know what to do with it. And this is in general, when we feel uncomfortable at something, what do? We clench up, we control. And so if I feel uncomfortable at sex, let me control it. Let me control the narrative. Let me shut it down because I'm uncomfortable, because I don't have the tools to talk about it. And so I think, I talk about like, it makes me frustrated that, we gatekeep each other, but the other side of me gets really compassionate and says, where is this coming from? Because nobody's happy
Exactly.
here, right? So
Yeah.
like, where might this be? Like, what's the impetus for this? And I think it's fear, right? And it's, not being trained to not have agency over our bodies, at least mentally, right? To think that way. Then when we have that, we don't know what to do with it, and it's not something that's relegated to South Asians. If you look at some of the trends outside, in the wider U.S. community, it's often the women that are sort of the loudest voices against women's rights.
Yeah. No, I think that point of compassion is important, because I think even if it's projection or you can't because I couldn't, I think a lot of that is so subconsciously driven, right? Like we're just autopiloting, like doing what we know and projecting what we know versus like that's, in my right state of mind, actually what I want for the world.
Exactly. Exactly. It's a trap, and at the end of the day, that's my goal. Like, let's get out of this trap. Let's see things. Let's see things for the way that they are, and let's enjoy the life that we live and the bodies that we have.
Yes. Oh, I love that. Okay. Is there anything we didn't? I'm going to ask you some rapid fire questions.
Great.
But before I do that, is there anything we didn't cover? Because I know, like, you walked in saying, like, oh, I want to, there were some things you wanted to cover, but then,
But I don't go into people's houses. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, you made that really clear, and you even looked at the camera when you said that.
I did. I don't know. People have all kinds of wild ideas about what I do. No, I think, not that I can think of. I think I just, sex is important, period.
Period. Okay, ready? Rapid?
Let's go.
You have to go fast. I'm just kidding. Nobody ever does. All right. What is one societal norm that you've received or message that you've received indirectly or directly that you now are like opting out of? You said so many today, but go. Yeah,
I know.
Yeah, I know. I was like, I could answer for you now, but go ahead.
Yeah, can't talk about sex.
Please.
Says who, right?
Yeah.
Says who. I think another really big one is marriage and kids. And also like...
When you say marriage and kids, you mean?
Like the message that like this is what you are meant to do.
Okay.
That there are alternatives, that women maybe don't want to have kids, and that's okay. And to opt out of the norm or the default that like, of course you're going to be married and have kids.
Yeah.
Of course this is what you want.
Yeah.
Another big one is alternative sexual lifestyles, right? So, understanding that like polyamory isn't about attachment and that I'm missing something or what, you know, so just exploring some of these ideas and expanding our understanding of what sexuality is and who gets to have it.
Love that. Give me 3.
Overachiever here.
Overachiever. Okay. What is one thing you would do to restart your mental health daily or every other day? Just like kind of a practice you have in your life.
I like to keep a flexible schedule. Okay. I feel like I do a lot and I juggle a lot on any given day.
Yeah.
But I make my schedule and I put in buffers.
Yeah.
And so I check in throughout the day and I'm like, okay, do I need 5 extra minutes to, I don't know, like sit or to nap or to listen to music? And so throughout the day, I have buffers and I check in and I say, do I want to be flexible right now? And do I just need to take another 30 minutes?
I love that.
Yeah.
That's really healing for the inner child. It's like unstructured time.
Exactly.
Right? Okay. Last one. What's the funniest piece of advice you've ever received on like the topic of mental health or I guess sexual health too?
I don't know if it's a piece of advice, but I always find it funny. I met somebody recently who I think was trying to strike up a conversation and proceeded to tell me all about so men think like this about sex and women think like this. They had no idea what I did. But I was like, had you bothered to ask?
Had they stopped for a second.
Correct. We would have had a
very... They just gravitated to give you all that kind of information.
Yeah, they're like, oh, I just read a lot. And these are things that I read about. And I'm like, okay, well.
Should I correct them with research?
Like, oh, that's fascinating. Great, cool. Yeah. Where'd you pick that up? Okay, awesome. Great. So I think it's what I think is funny is when people, you know, they try to wax at me.
Yeah, that's hilarious.
When do I?
Does that happen often?
Sometimes.
Wow.
In certain spaces, yeah. I think there's a.
So they're actually giving you advice too.
And they're sort of yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
Little do they know.
I know.
hope they're watching this because you are the expert with the research in the pocket, so it doesn't make any sense.
It's also really funny because you'll have like, you know, I call them JP Morgan chases, like people who are like in a very, and good on them for reading, but they will pull out that one piece of research that they found on a headline and be like, this. And I'm like, you know, there's like I remember some guy once was like, you know, but Harvard has this like, you know, so he was making a case to me about how like why people should be married. And I was like, oh God, okay. You know, wow. And he was like, well, Harvard has this 75-year longitudinal study that shows, you know, like the most important factor for like longevity is you know, is like companionship and staying together. And I was like, wow, the number of assumptions that we're making right now, right? Beneficial to who? Is companionship the same thing as marriage? Like, what's the difference between men and women, right? Like, what, like, and there's other research that shows, right, that, you know, partnerships are, you know, not always the best for your health. And for women, it actually leads to poorer health outcomes. So it's just interesting because I think I get a lot of people who like want to headline research and make, you know, sort of stock assumptions about relationships, and that's hilarious to me.
Hilarious. That's your funniest. Okay. And here we are getting advice from you.
I mean, sometimes people are also just like feel better, and I'm like, great.
I hate that one.
It's not so funny as it is, you know, but here we are.
Actually unfortunate. Anyways, okay, thank you so much.
Absolutely.
This was it. I love this. I enjoyed it so much.
Me too.
I learned a ton.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on and letting me wax about something that's really important to me. I appreciate it.
Thanks for putting me on the spot with those questions.
Yeah, right?
Really not trying to get into any trauma today, but geez.